Have you ever found yourself in a conversation and it just feels like everyone else is speaking in a code you don't know? You know, a secret language that seems to give people access and authority? Well, today, we're going to go on a little historical treasure hunt to uncover a powerful pattern that's been hiding in plain sight. It's a pattern of how language itself gets turned into a tool of control. So that brings us to a pretty intense question. Can words actually be weapons? It's at the very heart of what we're talking about today. We're going to dig into how these specialized vocabularies aren't just for experts in a field. We're going to see how they can be used really deliberately to draw lines in the sand, to create these hierarchies, and to justify actions that end up affecting millions and millions of lives. Okay, so to really get this, we're going to have to rewind the clock a bit. We're going to look at what you could call a historical blueprint, the language of Catholicism, specifically from its period of massive global expansion. And just to be clear, this isn't just a history lesson. Think of it as a case study in how these systems get built, right from the ground up. To really understand the church's influence, you have to get that it developed this incredibly specific, unique vocabulary. You see words like transubstantiation, which is a really complex idea about how bread and wine become sacred, or a papal bull, which is an official decree from the Pope. These weren't just words. They were like a firewall. They created a clear barrier between the initiated in-group and literally everyone else. What's so interesting is that the specialized language created this real tension inside the faith itself. It basically pitted two different ideas of a good Catholic against each other. Was it the person who could debate all the doctrines, a faith of the head? Or was it the person who just lived out values like service and compassion, a faith of the heart? All of a sudden, knowing the right words could be seen as the ultimate proof of your belief. And that's exactly what happened. The ability to speak Catholic turned into a kind of litmus test. It was this quick, easy shortcut to judge over people, to figure out who was a real Christian and who wasn't, based not on what they did or who they were as a person, but on whether they'd mastered this very particular set of words. Okay, and this is where the pattern takes a really dark turn. During the whole era of colonial expansion, that litmus test was weaponized. So when European powers came across indigenous communities, this religious language became the standard they were judged by. If you couldn't explain the catechism or, recite prayers in a very specific way, you were just labeled pagan or savage. And we really have to be clear about this. This wasn't some abstract debate happening in a church somewhere. This linguistic test became the actual justification for real-world violence on a truly massive scale. It was used to legitimize wiping out entire cultures, seizing land, and oppressing millions of people. Not being able to speak the right words was basically treated as a forfeiture of your humanity. So let's fast forward to today, because this pattern of using language as a tool for power, it's far from ancient history. Actually, it's pretty likely you hear its modern version almost every single day. So that brings us to the big question for today, right? Has this method of control actually disappeared? Or has the exact same blueprint just been picked up by a new global power structure with a totally new set of words? Now, take a look at this list. This is the language of the modern global economy. You see terms like EBITDA, which is just a fancy way to measure corporate profit, or quantitative easing. For most of us, these terms might as well be ancient Latin. And they work in pretty much the same way, as a form of gatekeeping that decides who gets a seat at the table where the big decisions are made. And this leads to a new kind of credentialism. I mean, think about it. If the seminary was the place that certified you were fluent in the language of God, well, today, the MBA certifies your fluency in the language of capital. It's the modern piece of paper that proves you speak the language, and it gives you access to the rooms where global decisions get made. It's kind of wild when you put it that way. So now we're going to bring these two threads together, because this isn't just about excluding people. This modern economic language follows the exact same pattern of justifying exploitation that we saw with the religious blueprint. The crusade continues, it's just flying a different flag now. And when you lay it out like this, the pattern is it's undeniable. The language changes, sure, it goes from theology to economics. The justification shifts from saving souls to market liberalization. But look at the target, it stays the same. Communities and nations that happen to have valuable resources. And the outcome? It's identical. The extraction of wealth, which leaves economic dependency behind. So all of this complex economic jargon, it often just acts as a smokescreen. It helps frame these interventions with nice-sounding words like structural adjustment.
But, as this quote shows, the simpler truth is usually about control, not charity. It suggests that these interventions aren't really aimed at helping struggling nations, but at gaining access to resource-rich ones.
Okay, so what do we do with all this? How do we use this information? Well, just recognizing the pattern is the first and most important step. It lets us look past all the complicated terminology and ask a much, much simpler question. Who really benefits here? So I think the most important thing to take away from all this is simple. That crusading mentality, it's still with us. That impulse to impose one system on other people for the purpose of extraction is alive and well. The only thing that's really changed is the vocabulary, from a language of scripture to a language of spreadsheets. And that leaves us with one final thought. We've looked at religion, we've looked at economics, but this pattern, it's not just limited to those two areas. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What other languages of power are out there shaping our world right now in ways we might not even see?